have started over. We now throw in the mix of, we've got two different styles in there. Lewis, the other person is get to the point, show me the information. Fair? What style do you think that person could be?
Probably, I want to say either C or D.
And I think that's a fair grab. Anywhere at the top of the spectrum here. So now we've got folks with two different styles. What do we do in those situations? How do you handle that? Because now I'm telling you guys, you got to adapt to the audience in front of you, but now you got two different styles. What do you need to do? This is the interactive portion of the program.
I haven't been here for the training, but my gut tells me pick who you think is more influential and mirror their style first.
David, your answer is absolutely fair because not everybody here has been along, and disc is usually, sometimes newer for people. So how you frame it up is good. Yes, sometimes I want to identify who really carries the weight in that conversation. If I can identify who carries the weight, then I'm probably going to pivot a little bit more to that individual. So David, great observation. Not everybody nails that right out of the gate. Prakash, jump in here.
Would it be fair to assume, assume is a wrong word here, but a person who's a D style is probably the person who's carrying the weight?
Not always the case. I mean, I think in general, we might say D's are the leaders, but we don't know. And there may be also some, who knows of the relationship of the people that are working together. We don't know. So we can take a little bit of that and maybe guess, but I'd want to be a little bit more accurate there, but I think a fair point. What else can we do in this situation? You got somebody at the top and somebody doing a lot of talking in the bottom right. How do we balance or how do we handle that situation?
You have to kind of be delicate about it because you don't exactly want to, you want to include both people. You don't want to just focus on the one and then just kind of just ignore the other one. You have to acknowledge that the other person is there, but make sure that, your main focus should be the one that's talking, because again, the more information, the more nuggets they give you, then it's just more listening, more questions that you can follow up on. Because if you're just talking to somebody that's not giving you information, it's kind of hard to follow up with questions.
You want to be consistent by the way, as we get deeper into Sandler, we'll understand questioning strategies. Lewis, I can almost envision you need to pivot. You need to talk to one person. You need to talk to the other person. You can draw them in a little bit more, but you want to do somewhat of I like the word delicate, because as much as I want to isolate the person, I want to make sure that I bring them together. And let's assume Prakash is right, that the D style or that C style, who's being a little bit more direct, is in that leadership role. If we start to cut off the person who's being talkative, and maybe we're not following the cues that are going on in the room, that person might observe us as being a little bit short with an individual. So we've got to be respectful of what's occurring in the room, reading body language. And what I say to people is, you want to pivot, you want to adjust your body and your eye control on the individual that's doing the talking at that time. Yeah, Prakash.
It might also be cultural, because I have been in situations back in India where the person who's doing the talking is almost like the pawn that the people in the back are sending forward to do all the talking, and they are doing the quiet observation.
100%. Could be cultural, could also be, there are some S styles and C styles that take great leadership roles. They have great leadership characteristics. They could be sitting back and taking it in and observing how you're handling everybody. So we've got to be aware of that. So we understand the disc styles. I'm going to kind of blow us ahead. Any questions, any other questions that folks have as it relates to disc? And remember, we got the 3 different levels. We want to be able to observe. We want to be aware of ourselves. We want to be able to observe the other person. And then we want to be able to adapt. That's really that high level element. If we look here also, go back to this. I pointed it out last week. People have 2 different styles. They have a natural style, So as we get to know each other, we get more comfortable, our natural style comes out. That's when there's no stress, but there's also a perceived need to adjust. Each one of us has these different styles. For some, they're more closely related. For others, there's a little bit of that band pulling. But think about a selling situation. Somebody is going to have a perceived need to adjust in all likelihood early on in the relationship. And that's what makes this a little bit more difficult to better understand, because until you really develop rapport, we won't see that natural style come out. So Lyle, I think you're a great example in the mortgage business. You probably get phone calls and emails from people that are pissed off, that say, I need it today, I need this. And then a few weeks later, they're cupcakes eating out of his hand. They're all of a sudden, all that style, all that aura starts to go away. I know, Lyle, you were smiling. You're on mute, by the way.
So it's interesting you say, because you said that there's like, you have a natural style and then there's a projected style.
Yep.
Right? Which was interesting because this may be an extreme example, but if you're into your superheroes, my natural style is the Incredible Hulk, and I try to be Steve Bannon. I try to keep that guy down and not let him come out and steamroll everybody. So that's the one I try to keep. And in fact, now my current manager is trying to let that come out a little bit more. He's like, be more aggressive with people. Don't take shit. And I generally try to do that, but that's interesting to recognize that I do that.
Yeah, and by the way, there are, and we're kind of at level 1 right now. Some of you may be a little bit further along. There are times where, and I've gotten to know Lyle pretty well. I can tell Lyle is very direct. He and I have great conversations. But I think we can all sense his directness. There are other folks on this call that probably are listening to Lyle, and when he says, my boss wants me to be more aggressive, we may shake a little bit. Boy, I don't want to be any more aggressive than I am. But there are times for each one of us to grab that more aggressive style and bring it into play. That may be later in a sales opportunity. Allison, you may be in a position where somebody's not making a decision. At some point, we're going to say, grab that D style, that driver style, and bring that out. Never will Allison be a D at the level that a Lyle or a Bo would be, because they've got that naturally in there. But some of us could dial it up every once in a while, and you'll never come off looking abrasive as much as you want to try. We're just wired a little bit differently. So Lyle, I think that's a great story. For orientation purposes, we have not done, I don't think I've done any one-on-ones with anybody on their disc. I am happy to do that, to really do a deep dive. When you go through it, as people start to read into the depths of this report, there are going to be things that pop up. Simone, this is your report. There are going to be things that pop up that'll say, this is not natural to your style, and things that are more natural to your style. Do not take any of this personally. It doesn't mean when something is not natural that you can't do it. What it simply means is it may be a learned opportunity. You may have to learn it. Maybe you've learned it over time, or you just have to work a little bit harder at developing that skill. It in no way indicates that somebody can't do something. Again, I'm a DI or an ID given the day. I sit right on the line. My wife would tell you, and I can share some stories, that when it comes to attention to detail, my attention to Allison, you're not supposed to be laughing. My attention to detail could be relatively low. When it comes time to be, if I'm dealing with a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer, somebody in manufacturing, I have to really hyper focus on my C style. And what that means is it burns a little bit more energy. Can I do it? Absolutely. But it is not natural to my style. Just doesn't mean that I can't do it. I just got to focus a little bit more. Don't take anything negatively here. Any questions or thoughts here? No? Hopefully I'm not boring everybody to death here.
I have a question. Well, not a question, but like I have something, I guess.
Let's go. Just kidding.
I have like a close to no D. It like very, very low. So, but ironically, I had someone who I would perceive as a D style personality give me her, like she gave me perceptions of myself, right? So she was talking about me, and in her perceptions, she actually described, like, I almost felt like she was projecting her own personality outward, because she described me as being, you know, very like abrasive, which I don't find, you know, it's very against my, it was just weird. So is that something that can happen? Like people will project their own onto others? Or
You know, well,
do I
can you
have more
go a bit
D?
I'm not a psychologist, and we work
Yeah.
with a couple psychologists, but out of curiosity, can you give a little bit more insight? Was it a work relationship? Was it a personal relationship?
It's a work relationship. So like abrupt, delivers bad news first, like stuff like that, which I mean, as a high ISC, like almost equal distribution across the three.
Yep.
That's like completely, it just felt very, I don't know.
Did you record the call?
Yeah, that's how I found out what she talked about.
It would be interesting, because what it may be is simply she didn't win whatever was occurring in that moment.
Mhm.
And a D always needs to win. So and also you may be moving at a pace that's not at her pace, and she may find that as being abrasive.
Yeah, okay.
Many of us, you know, not off the chart Ds, you know, if I'm meeting with Lyle and or Bo, and Bo, you know, I'm throwing you kind of in just a generic mix. If I am moving a little bit too slow for them, it's probably annoying them a little bit. So maybe the word abrasive, we might define a little bit differently. But I've had some Ds that I've sold to in the past, Renee, where I've moved too slow for them, and I have a bit of D, and they've come back and said, boy, you're really starting to piss me off. You were just moving a little bit too slow. And I said, just so you're aware, I've got to work through my process. I've got a couple of examples where I've closed those deals in under 30 minutes and they thought it was too slow. And Bo will attest, it is not a 30-minute conversation. It's a couple of conversations to get to the finish line. So probably you didn't meet her in her world. She didn't win, and maybe that's what's going on. I'd love to see the gong, and we can dig more into it.
Well, I can share it with you.
Okay. So very quick. What I love, and I'm going to very quickly blow through this. At the back of the report, starting on, I believe, page 21, you start to get how to identify. And we want to start to build in a little bit of a practice. So really here through the end of the report gives you all of your cheat sheets. This stuff is gold. I would go through it. And what I would suggest is we want to start to be able to identify individuals, and we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. So as you start to enter sales or service meetings, here's my suggested approach. I sit down with Allison. Really, in the first few minutes of the meeting, what I like to do is I like to write down what I think that person's disc style is. And then I lock it in. Allison's an S. I stop thinking about it. I just try to put on my S aura as best as I can. I'm not going to overdo it. I'm going to just be myself a little bit, but a little bit of slowing it down, because I know that that's what S is like. Probably ask more questions. At the conclusion of the meeting, when you get back to the office, go back for validation. So I now go back to the office. I wrote Allison as an S, and I go back and I look at those little cheat sheets and I go, did I get it right? Did I see things that are consistent? And what I'm trying to build up is a bit of muscle memory. And then the next time when I go out to Allison, now maybe I've rethought it. Boy, I saw a little bit of S, but I see a little bit of I in there as well. I just try to play that role again, and I come back. What I don't want folks to do is during the meeting, me going, boy, is Allison an S? Oh, she might be a C. And then Allison asked me a question, and I'm going, I have no idea what you just asked me, Allison, because I'm so worried about it. Do this in bite-sized chunks over time so that we can get really good at reading it. Additionally, do it with your family and with your friends, but really keep it simple. Don't over focus on the disc style of somebody. Try to build that muscle memory up on what they are. And then some very quick tips, and then I'll shut up. So one of the things is we communicate via email, we communicate by, telephone, sometimes it's in person. As we start to better understand DISC, it will make shifts in your approach. And some very quick examples. If I am dealing with a D, I am typically going to respond a little bit quicker to emails. I'm typically going to give them answers when they ask me questions a little bit more quicker. I'm going to dial up my D awareness for that individual. I might even challenge a D a little bit more. I'll look for those opportunities. In my email communications, do you think I'm using emojis with a D? Does anybody use emojis in their emails? There's a few of us. A D may not appreciate the emoji as much as an I or an S will. A D doesn't want a long dialogue in your email. A D doesn't want a 20-minute conversation for what could be a 2-minute conversation. Flip the script. If I'm dealing with an I might ask them how their weekend was in an email or when I speak to them. I'm gonna give them always time to talk. I can actually, what I love about I's, because I carry a fair amount of I's, I can be a little bit looser. So having a typo in an email with an I is okay. Having a typo in an email with a C is not okay. If I'm emailing a C, I am putting bullets, I am putting numbers, I have a very organized structure. I am never late for a D or a C meeting. Never. As a matter of fact, I'm typically always early for a D or C meeting because they like punctuality. If I'm in person with a C or a D, I never touch them. I don't touch their shoulder. I don't put things on their desk. I'm creating that awareness. And I'm with an S, I'm being a little bit more friendly. I'm helping them gather timelines. I'm staying, for those that don't understand the term, way behind the pendulum, but I'm allowing them to have time to make decisions. No pressure. I help them build the timelines. So these are all things that are, again, I'm doing a lot of talking here, but when we're communicating for folks, it will be a game changer. It will absolutely be a game changer. I walked into a former attorney, moved into his family's financial services practice, where they had 38 salespeople. So attorney, he's now the managing partner at a financial services firm here in Princeton. I walk into his office and he goes, it's a Monday. And by the way, I get along great with the guy. He goes, Dave, my apologies. My office is a mess. I was in Chicago all week. I'm just getting back today. And I am looking around his office. There is nothing on the desk. The cabinets are clean. And I'm going, have you ever seen my office, Mike? That is the perfect example of a high C. I never put anything on his desk. I put all my stuff on a chair that sits below his desk. These are the little nuggets that change the perception of how people will react and respond to you. And again, we're going to build it. It's going to take a few months. Maybe for some, it's a little bit quicker. For others, it takes a little bit of time. We're going to build this arsenal. It will help you win more business. Thoughts, questions, clarification. Prakash, jump in here.
How can I work this if I'm trying to do an email blast? Because I cannot some people in that list will be C's and some will be D's and some will be I's. How can I generalize when I'm talking to different people?
It has
The reason I'm leading up to something else. Tomorrow evening, I have an event. I have several people signed up for the event. And if I have a bunch of people and I'm going to make a presentation, I never thought of DISC when I designed my presentations. Now, how do I incorporate that?
Yeah, I think in general, we have to be generic enough to try to bring folks in. it's typically in a group setting. What I'm looking for is when somebody is speaking to me, can I do a quick turnaround on their disc style? And usually the way people formulate questions gives you a bit of a insight. You know, a D style is going to say, hey, Prakash, tell me how this works. You know, an S or maybe an I style will tell you a little bit of a story about their kids. They have a son or a daughter, they have this going on, and you know, will this help? You'll see it in their body language and what it takes. I want to answer their questions in the format that they were just asked. Here's another, again, tactically, most of us are in person at some level. We have a long opportunity, 15, 20, 30-minute conversations, maybe as long as an hour plus. Simone is on the phones all day long. She has to assess, similar to when you're doing a Q&A, Prakash, the disc style of a prospect instantly. Not easy to do. But we know if you listen to a call from Simone and somebody says, would you get to the point? Simone goes, let me take 30 seconds, I'll get to the point. She'll dial it right into what their disc style is. She'll shorten up some of her pain statements and make sure that she's hitting them in the space that they want to be spoken to based on that response. So we've got to be a little bit quicker. When we're in the field, we have a little bit more time to make these assessments. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to it. It is a game changer. It is absolutely. There are some things where I say it's Sandler. They don't happen overnight, but they are game changers. This is one of them. Prakash, your point on transactional analysis, Sandler would tell you that that's the jet fuel that moves sales to a completely different level if we can master that. Not easy to do. Other questions or thoughts before I keep moving here?
I was saying that probably what really helps, at least I know definitely helps me, is mirroring. You know, we may not remember all the tidbits about each style, but at least when it is that we do mirror that conversation, you know, with that prospect, it also assists with the conversation and then helps you to win that person over. And, you know, have that flowy conversation, because typically I would be more on the steady, the passive side then. But then if I'm with a direct person, then as you rightfully said, I'd have to get to the point.
Yep. Yeah, and they'll give you those and by the way, David and Hariam, who spend quite a bit of time on the phones, you know, you get people, all right, what do you got for me? They're jumping right into it. Maybe an indicator that that they're a little bit of a D style. And probably not too far of a stretch from in the world of law.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, someone's jumping in.
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely. I was speaking with a candidate just the last week, exactly the same nature. What do you got for me? And I said, well, I need to learn a little bit more about you first so I can tell you what I have. I have a lot. And he said, all right, give me a call another time. I said, okay.
Yeah, so, and by the way, a D saying, what do you got for me might be, I don't know if I have anything for you. That may be the best response for a D.
Right.
Hitting them because because what it creates, Mario, a little bit of friction, and D's like to go to battle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try it with Bo next time I talk to him. See how well it works. Keep them coming, mark down every appointment you go on, just mark it down. And if you forget to do it in the appointment, when you get back to the office, do it. Don't think about it during the meeting. Do it either quickly at the front end or do it at the end and then validate it. It will build up that muscle memory. It will absolutely do it. And this is kind of like an undercurrent of the entire Sandler process. It just sits there. I'm throwing back up the Sandler process. I'm going to shift gears for our last 20 plus minutes here. I do want to get a little bit into some tactical stuff. So at the back end of our process, and by the way, it's another, there's always a mislead at Sandler. This is called the post-sell step. This happens throughout the entire selling process. We'll build it out for you. But this is really the glue to secure people. So I have a question. Does anybody have a friend or a family member that perhaps, like, I don't know, maybe it's somebody you go to concerts with or do family events with, and that person inevitably is either always late, shows up late, or sometimes is a no-show. Does anybody know anyone like that? Prakash, yeah, David, Renee, you know somebody like that? Brian, you know some, Brian, who's your person?
It's me.
Oh,
I show up late to
you're the one
concerts
getting
and
in the
things.
way. All right. Prakash, who's your person that does this?
I'm not supposed to say it, but it's my wife.
All right, we won't tell her, even though this is recorded. Hang on, I'll mute your line, and you're Prakash's wife. So when we have, everybody knows someone like that. When we have situations, Bo, do you know anybody like this?
It's me.
It's, by the way, I would never have suspected it. So when we know someone like this, we usually have a tactic that we use to either A, make sure that they show up, or B, make sure they show up on time. Renee, who is your person? What is it, a friend? Is it a family member? Is it you?
Okay.
Okay, so apparently we have everybody who's late or doesn't show up for things on today's call. No wonder why we started at 11:03 today. So Renee, when you, who's jumping in? Go, Ron.
I have a friend like that, and I don't see him that much anymore, but he comes in and out of my life, and he was the first person I ever met like this. And basically what I learned to do, and I do this with everybody now, is I always have a backup plan.
Tell us
if-
about the backup plan.
What's that?
What's the backup plan?
Well, like if I was going to meet him for lunch, he said, "Oh, I'll meet you in the city for lunch." Right? I'm going to make other plans so that if he cancels, at least I'm there and I have something like, there's no way in hell I'm going to make a day that I'm going to go in and expect to have lunch with him unless I got a fallback.
And Lyle, so let's imagine you were setting up a lunch with this guy at 12 noon. What might be some of the things that you would say to him to make sure he either shows up or shows up on time?
It doesn't matter.
What? Oh, it doesn't matter? Renee, what do people say? Renee, what do people say to you to make sure that you show up on time?
Well, my husband just starts the car, like, no, but you can like sometimes tell him like 10 minutes ahead. I'll be like, oh, you need to be there at like 12:50 if I have to be there at like 1. So.
All right, so you give a 10-minute buffer. Allison, were you going to jump in here?
I mean, if it's, well, my husband will say like, is this real time or is this Allie's time? Like, because I just have no concept of time. Or like if we're making plans, like he'll sometimes, and I won't know, like he'll tell me like 30 minutes before like we need to be leaving.
Okay.
But
So-
it doesn't go well when he changes and it's like, wait a minute, you said I had this amount of time.
That's never good.
No.
We would call that, these are all examples of post-selling, and I'll talk a little bit more about post-sell in a couple of different lights. But one of the elements of the post-sell step is to eliminate what we call buyer's remorse. So I know that this doesn't happen to anybody here, but so maybe you have a friend that's in sales that this has happened to, where you set up a meeting and the prospect didn't show up. Do you know anybody that's ever had that happen to them? Okay. Everybody's got a friend like that, right? Because again, it doesn't happen here. Or prospect shows up 15 minutes late and says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm running 15 minutes late. Those tactics that we use in real life, we actually want to bring into the conversation throughout the sales process. So when we think of post-sale, it's going to have 3 elements to it. One is what we call eliminate buyer's remorse. I also like to expand that out to, it helps the prospect remain accountable. And at the back end of the sale, we are eliminating buyer's remorse. And I don't know if this has happened to anybody here in all seriousness, where somebody has said, yeah, we're going to go ahead, we're going to do business with you. They agree that they're going to do, hey, we'll get started, send me over a contract. And then all of a sudden they back out. They say, we're going to stay with our same vendor, or we've decided to go a different direction. What post-sell allows us to do in those situations is eliminate from that happen. In other words, you guys may have heard me say, when we send out a proposal or a contract or a statement of work, we are operating as close to 100% close rate, and we're going to use post-sell to secure that at the back end of the sale. The second reason, or the second element of post-sale, is to expand within the relationship that we have. So for some of us, we might have, maybe it's B2C, maybe it's B2B, but we may have more opportunity behind or beyond the client that we're bringing on board. Bo, I'm looking at you, you're actually in kind of in my eyesight today, but Bo might have somebody who says, hey, yeah, we'll get started, but instead of spending $20,000 a month, we'd like to start out at 10. So how do we develop that expansion, that long-term expansion, to move them from 10 to 20? Or perhaps, Lewis, it's how do we get into different divisions at an organization? We are going to lay that groundwork really throughout the course of the sale so that it makes it a little bit easier downstream. So we've got two elements of post-sale: eliminate buyer's remorse, that includes some of that ghosting stuff, and expand the relationship. And the third element is to gain additional introductions beyond that individual or company that we're doing business with. Can they pass us on to other folks? So post-sale sits by definition at the end of the Sandler process. You've already won the business because at fulfillment, we delivered the proposal, which the prospect has now signed or is about to sign. So we will post-sell that opportunity. All right, so I'm really at about a 25, 30,000 foot view here. And these are all tactics we'll talk a little bit more about in a few moments. Thoughts or clarification here, questions? Yeah, Prakash.
Would any of that happen before? What I mean is during the fulfillment itself. I can think
Oh, yeah.
of a couple of things.
Again, it's a misleading step in my opinion, and it's hard to. We're always working on trying to redraw this at Sandler. I think that there's a couple of different versions that I can visualize, but you could imagine similar to bonding and core and similar to upfront contracts, post sales occurring all the way through. And let's give an example of that. It's really throughout the entire process. So let's imagine. Bo, I won't use you. I'll use Hariom for a second. Hariom tells me, by the way, I use the term by the way all the time. Maybe a friend of yours, probably didn't happen to you. A prospect told you that they had all sorts of issues. And we got really excited and said, hey, we can help them fix this. And we move to solution. And then we develop a solution, a statement of work, a proposal, and they come back and they go, ah, that's not really what I was looking for. Has anybody ever had that happen to them potentially? Or maybe it's happened to a friend of yours. So Prakash, by the way, no one said that happened to them. So everybody's got this locked and loaded. That's good. Prakash is the only one. Pain. So let's imagine I'm selling to Hariom, and Hariom tells me he's got some issues. He's got 2 or 3 issues. He's telling me those issues. What I might do is, well, I'm gonna, as we go back in time or as we go forward, we'll talk about how to elicit and better qualify and quantify pain. But at some level, I'm gonna say, Hariom, you've got these 2 or 3 issues that you've shared with me. Are they really that important? Or can you tell me more? In that situation, Hariom, in all likelihood, will double down on his pain. So Prakash, what I'm using post-sale for is really a form of validation. I want him to double down. So I might equate that to validation. Hariom, tell me more about this. And that allows him to double down. So that could be an example where we use it. Let's imagine Hariom says, I've got $150,000 to invest in this project. I might say, Hariom, are you sure you have $150,000? Does somebody else need to approve this? While that may be very tactical in a Sandler sense, that is another form of post-sale. And then another example might be, Hariom, can you unmute for a second? Can you be a little bit wishy-washy on this? And then we'll dial it back in. He doesn't know where I'm going. Hariom, let's imagine you and I are setting an appointment for next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Hariom, and you're going to be a little bit wishy-washy to start. Hariom, let me ask you a question. Are you good next Wednesday at 11?
Next Wednesday at 11. I'm not sure.
Let me ask you a question. If we were to block out 45 minutes, do you think that that would work, or should we find a better time?
45 minutes, maybe that could work. Let me check my calendar.
Okay, so right now, by the way, we've all set up appointments like this, where it's been wishy-washy. My brain immediately goes to, I need to double down on Hariam using my post-sell tactics. Because if Hariam were more agreeable, I can dial that back. So Hariam, now agree with me that 11 to 11:45 is good. Hariam, 11 to 11:45, you think that that'll work for you?
Yeah, I think that should work for me.
Here's an example of post-sell. Hey, Hariam, a couple of moments ago when we were setting this up, 11 to 11:45 wasn't good. Are you sure that that time really works for you? Or is there something else competing with it?
You know what? Yeah, no, that works with me.
Okay.
We're good.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If I were to call you at 11, like we're scheduling, and I don't get you, what should I do at that moment?
Just give me a voicemail and then I'll probably give you a call back.
Okay. And if I don't hear back from you?
If you don't hear back from me, I'll probably, just reach out to me again the day after or so.
Okay. Those are a couple of examples of post-sale, and I can tell you right now, I personally am not scheduling that appointment. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, but I am going to look for an alternative time, or I am going to look to disqualify. Hariam, you played it perfectly. I did 3 post-sales there, 3 little tactics. Are you sure that time works? What happens if I don't get you? What type of voicemail, when would I hear back from you? That is 3 levels. You may be uncomfortable with that, but I can tell you Hariam is being as wishy-washy as could be, and I'd rather not put him on my calendar for fear that he won't show up. It doesn't mean I don't try to find an alternative time. It simply should get my antenna raised up that this one's a little bit shakier than my Renee appointment, who said, yeah, 11 o'clock works perfect. That's awesome. I'd love to meet with you. So Prakash, that's an example of bringing post-sell into the middle of the conversation. I'll give one other example here. Questions, thoughts, clarification?
I have a question. David, so, obviously like Simone and I, we do a lot of cold calling, right? And sometimes we know attorneys are held back, or maybe your audience is working with someone else, right? They could be working with other recruiters, whatever service you are. On the outset, would you recommend sometimes it's best to do like a 1-2 punch, or like first call, just keep it basic and generic introduction and try to build rapport and not go into it, and then give them a call back again next week? Hey, just want to call back again. I've got something for you that I want to share. Then go to that appointment, clear next step.
I
can say something too with that too.
Jump in, Simone.
I had that question as well, and then after doing it, realizing that it is so hard to get through to the decision maker to begin with. And I think that's the reason David approaches how it is, where we do bonding and rapport throughout, or at least from the get-go as best as we can, to kind of soften them up as well. But I get what you're saying, because most times persons want to speak with someone they know, they like, they trust, but how can you develop that relationship so quickly from a first call? And especially when persons are so busy. But I find that most of the times it's so difficult as it is to get through to these decision makers. We just have to hit it as we get it.
Yeah. And that's again upon discretion, right? I mean,
yeah,
I want to say 7 out of 10 times we are successful, or that, there's that 30-40% people that we just will get knocked down. And those people, you kind of have to massage them a little bit to get through them over the course. It's more of a longer game with them. What do you think about that, David?
Yeah, it's always discretionary, and I will suggest, and we don't have time to do it today. Each one of us has our own sales process. I am typically a fan of, in a first meeting, developing rapport, identifying what I would call light pain or pain indicators. I don't want anything heavy, and then scheduling a second call. And I need to give enough time for that to occur. So in my model, it's typically a 30-minute intro call to do exactly that, Hariam. And I think it's always a read of the situation. And both you and Simone raised great points. For each one of us, we would want to look at that independently to make sure we're developing the right sales process for that 80-20 rule based upon your business, because each one will have a little bit of uniqueness, but I think great read on that, Hariom. All right, any other questions related to post-sale? I'm going to go now back to the back end, and I have a video teed up. I'll save it for next week because it's about 4 minutes and it'll run us out of time. And then it's a David Sandler video from like 1982. And 50% of the group will say, I like that. 50% will say, I hate it. And I don't want to leave on a bad note with half the group. So we'll play it next week. At the back end of the sale, if you can imagine how David Sandler set up the post-sale eliminating buyer's remorse, and I'll play it back into the middle again in a moment. It literally is, David Rivera, you've now moved into Bo's position. So David Rivera, before you sign a contract, in my business and where I'm trying to get everybody is I want you to have as close to 100% close rate as possible. So how do we do that? Well, it means that we're really qualifying the heck out of people, and truly only high qualified opportunities get the business. And Renee, you heard some of the numbers yesterday. You saw fewer deals, more revenue in your business, which was awesome. That's what we're looking for. You spend time with the right people. So David, before I give you a statement of work, I might say something, or we might have a buildup to make sure that you are 100% ready to go. And I'm going to try to get to a point where David is going, can you send me over a proposal? And I'll be a little bit facetious here, but I might say, hey, David, before I send it over, is everything we talked about exactly what you're looking for? Imagine if I send you over the proposal, is there going to be any backing out on your end? Those are things that I typically won't say. That's what David Sandler designed post-sale to smell like. We've got to find our own language there that works for us. There are great examples of this at Sandler where personally, we've had people say, hey, can you send me over a contract? And I say, I'm not 100% sure if we're ready to send it over. Let's just make sure we've got a few things locked down before we get it in your hands. You know, and it's really, it's 100% the opposite of what a traditional salesperson is doing, in the sense that they want to get your proposal. William, the faster I get you a proposal, the better chance I have at winning a deal. At Sandler, it's fewer proposals to the right people to make sure that we got you locked and loaded. We've got the right solution. You've helped develop it along the way. That's ultimately what post-sale is. And we are, in some cases, literally having conversations. What happens when I give you the proposal? And if for some of you, you've noticed, we had almost a closing meeting where we sent out we agreed on it, we sent it out, we set a time for a yes or no decision. Some of you experienced that. Everything is calendared. That's an example of post-sale. That secures the deal. That makes sure we're sending out proposals for the right people. One other little element within, each one of us has different requirements in our business. I'll pick on David and Hariom. You guys need resumes. You know, you need their latest job resume. Lyle, you need a lot of financial information. Bo, you have people filling out when they agree to go to the next step, filling out kind of a review of their digital marketing. They've got to give you some data for you to do their analysis, or maybe they have to give you access to some link or some system. I don't know the business well enough. Those are all examples of post-sale. And what we might want to do in those situations, Hariom's familiar with this because we've talked about it in a different setting. But if Hariom has somebody that says, I'll get you a resume, or Lyle, we'll get you over all the financial information, or Bo, I'll get you access to our system so you can see the data. 100% of the time, we would hope people would deliver that. There is a percentage of fall off there. And at Sandler, what we want to do is we want to create a little bit more accountability. So in the Hariom case, if somebody says, I'll send you over the resume, Hariom, you and I have had this conversation. Hariom, when should I expect that from you? can we do this? If you're gonna have it to me by Wednesday, can I make a suggestion? Let's schedule a call Thursday morning so that we can review your resume. Let's make sure that I'm not missing anything. And that in fact, if there's any questions I have, we can get them out of the way. That is a great example. Bo, hey, can you get me over access to your digital marketing stuff? I'm kind of genericizing here because I don't know the right terms. Yes, I'll have it to you by Friday. Why don't we schedule a call on Monday to review what I've got? Your prospect will answer that with one of three things. One is, can't get it to you by Friday. Okay, when can you get it? You revalidate the time. I don't want to set a meeting. If they don't want to set a meeting, that tells you they're not getting it, that you're not getting that info. Or they say, absolutely, Monday works great. And it's another way to better qualify these folks. That's what we're doing. So earlier on in the process, when we inject some of these post-sale techniques, we're getting better qualification. Allison, it's the 408B2 notice, or it's statements, things like that. Those elements help us better qualify. We will draw them into the sales process way earlier than we had previously to Sandler. That's really the bigger takeaway from the post-sale step at this point. So let me shut up. We've covered quite a bit of ground. I know I do a lot of talking here in these sessions. Hariram, I'll see you tomorrow. That is the nature, but I will shut up for a moment. Questions, thoughts, clarification before we do wrap up.